Today, we are undertaking what is one of the most difficult deep dives we've ever prepared. We're looking at a case of sustained, systematic abuse that took place over several months at an East Texas facility, Pungadoodle's Daycare in Lindale, Texas.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Our mission today is to take the sources we have, the criminal affidavits, regulatory findings, court records, and really try to understand not just the shocking actions of the perpetrator, this woman, Catherine Guziechka,
Right.
but also to trace the legal journey that followed, and I think most critically, to expose the institutional failures that allowed this horrific pattern of abuse against 2-year-olds to go on for so long.
And when a tragedy like this happens in a place where children are supposed to be safest, the path to justice is almost never, a single straight line.
Exactly.
This case is a really powerful and disturbing blueprint for understanding why oversight is so necessary. We have to look at accountability through 3 different lenses. There's the criminal path, which is to punish the individual, then the administrative path to make sure she's permanently out of the system, and then the one that often gets overlooked, the civil path, which addresses the institutional negligence that allowed the harm to happen in the first place.
So let's start with that timeline, the sheer factual horror of it. The woman at the center of this, Catherine Guziechka, she was 44 at the time. She was booked in late October of 2024. But the abuse, it wasn't a sudden thing, was it?
Not at all. The arrest affidavits confirmed the assaults had allegedly been happening since July of 2024, and the victims, they were 6 children, all of them just 2 years old.
2 years old.
That time frame, July to October, is so critical because it shows just how sustained this was. Investigators determined that over those 3 months, Guziechka assaulted those 6 toddlers somewhere between 100 and 134 separate times.
100. Wait, 134 times?
100 to 134 separate occasions. Think about that number. This was not a moment of stress or a lapse in judgment. This was repeated, systematic, routine abuse. It was happening almost daily.
That routine element makes the details, which come straight from the affidavit, just so chilling.
It does.
Investigators went over hours of surveillance video, and one of the patterns they documented was kicking.
Yeah.
They describe a scenario where a child is just watching TV, and Guziechka comes up from behind and just kicks them swiftly in the back with her right foot.
And they saw this happen how many times?
They observed that specific act on 21 separate occasions.
Wow. It just speaks to this profound casual malice. These weren't kicks designed to, send a child to the hospital immediately.
Right.
They were designed to inflict sudden, unprovoked pain and confusion on a toddler who is completely helpless. And the affidavit showed it wasn't just physical force, but also this aggressive handling during, sensitive times.
Nap time. The handling during nap time was so hard to read about. She was seen aggressively moving sleeping children and sometimes yanking them out of their sleep by one arm and just dragging them to the changing table.
And the changing table itself became another site of aggression.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of being a safe space for care, the sources detail how she would aggressively lay kids down, push their heads down, and force them to face the wall away from the TV.
But I think if there's one detail from the source material that just sticks with you, it's the most specific, shocking act they caught on video.
I know what you're going to say.
Guziechka is seen standing on a child's left hand for a measured 7 seconds.
7 seconds.
Which caused the child to, quickly pull away in pain. 7 full seconds. That specific timing, it just feels so cruel, so calculated.
And that's exactly it. That level of calculated intent is what informed the criminal charges. The deputy's analysis in the affidavit was crucial.
What did he conclude?
He concluded that her actions were, and I'm quoting here, random, intentional, unprovoked, violent in nature, and done for the sole intent of inflicting pain.
Wow.
And it's so important to stress this. The children were not being disruptive. She was never seen consoling them afterward. This was just pure infliction of pain.
It's almost impossible to move past those details, but
Yeah.
we have to understand how it was finally exposed. If this was happening over 100 times and it was on camera, why didn't it surface earlier?
Well, the sources say the facility had surveillance video, but clearly no one was watching it. Not in real time, not routinely. The discovery, in October 2024, it only came about because a staffer just happened to see some of the footage.
And at first they weren't sure what they were seeing.
Initially, the staffer thought maybe one kick was an accident, But then the office staff reviewed it, and they saw this repetitive pattern.
And that staffer who brought it to the office staff's attention They did the right thing. They notified the father of one of the victims.
And that's what triggered the police investigation.
Okay.
The owner at the time, Melanie Law, she seems to have taken the right immediate steps once her staff realized what was happening.
Right.
Guziechka was fired the same day.
The very same day.
And Law immediately called law enforcement and the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, the DFPS, and she handed over all the video evidence. She fully cooperated.
So a swift response once it was discovered.
Mm-hmm.
But then shortly after these reports go public, the owner, Melanie Law, decides to sell the daycare.
Which is an interesting move.
It is. And while you can maybe understand it from a business perspective, it immediately brings up big questions about accountability, which I know we'll get back to.
For sure. But to keep tracking the story, we have to follow those first two paths to accountability. First, the criminal path against Guziechka herself.
Right. So she faced 6 counts of injury to a child with intent to cause bodily injury. These are very serious felony charges.
Extremely serious.
And she was held on a pretty high bond, right?
Yeah.
$450,000.
Yeah, in the Smith County Jail. The case moved pretty quickly from there, probably because of all the video evidence.
And the criminal journey, it concluded the next year. In September of 2025, Guziechka entered a guilty plea. Then just 2 months later, November 2025, she was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
10 years? That's the state's answer for punishing the individual. And at the same time, you had the state's regulatory bodies step in.
The DFPS.
Exactly. The Texas Department of Family and Protective Services did its own review, and their finding ensures Guziechka is permanently banned from working at any facility that cares for vulnerable people.
So not just daycares.
Nope. Daycares, hospitals, nursing homes, anywhere.
So the individual is punished and removed from the field.
Right. But here's the transition point. Because the 10-year sentence and the permanent ban, they only address the perpetrator. They don't address the environment that allowed her to do this unchecked for 3 months.
And that leads us to the third pathway.
The third pathway, institutional and corporate accountability.
Which is the crucial question this deep dive has to answer. How did Catherine Guziechka get away with this? On camera. Over 100 times.
Yeah.
For 90 days.
This is where the failure of Pumpkin Doodle's daycare itself just comes into sharp, damning focus. The sources reveal evidence of a deep, systemic failure that was actually recognized by state regulators before most of the abuse even happened.
Wait, before? What were we talking about specifically?
We're talking about a state licensing citation. It was issued in July of 2024, the very month the abuse allegedly began.
What was the citation for?
The daycare was cited for failing to have the required written policies and procedures on preventing and responding to child abuse and neglect.
Wow. So if they didn't even have the required written policies, what does that say about their actual training?
It suggests the foundation was completely broken.
It raises huge questions about whether caregivers were trained on prevention or what to do if they saw something, what red flags to look for. If they weren't trained on protocols, they weren't trained to report anything either.
Exactly. The lack of a written policy, it establishes a culture of negligence. Remember, Guziechka had been working there since September of 2023.
A year before she was caught.
So if the daycare lacked the most fundamental required protocols for abuse prevention right when this was all starting, it signals that the owner failed to provide basic, safe operating procedures. It created an environment where she might have felt, safe committing these acts on camera because supervision was clearly so lax.
The irony is just, it's powerful.
Yeah.
They had the cameras. The cameras are what ultimately gave prosecutors the proof they needed.
Right.
But as a preventative measure, they were totally useless.
Absolutely. The presence of cameras can create this false sense of security for everyone, for parents and for owners. But if those cameras aren't being reviewed routinely, frequently, and often, which they clearly were not,
then they're just hard drives.
They're just storage devices for future evidence of harm, not tools for immediate protection. The policy failure and the supervision failure went hand in hand.
And that created the 3-month window of vulnerability.
It did.
So let's circle back to the owner selling the daycare to someone new who planned to reopen it under a new name. Does that sale act as some kind of legal escape hatch? Can they just walk away from the accountability for all these failures?
Not at all, no. Selling the business to a new owner does not absolve the previous owners or the corporation, Pumpkin Doodles, of liability for its failures in hiring, training, and supervision.
Okay.
This is exactly why that civil action track is so vital. It's the mechanism you use to hold the corporation and the former owners financially accountable for that negligence. It provides resources for the victims, and just as importantly, it sends a clear economic message to the entire industry.
So this deep dive has traced a profoundly difficult story. From, unprovoked systemic abuse kicking, dragging, inflicting pain on 2-year-olds, all caught on video,
Over 3 months.
to the perpetrator's 10-year prison sentence and her permanent ban from the care industry.
And the resolution of the criminal case against Guzieka is essential for justice. It really is. But we have to remember that institutional failure was a key co-conspirator here.
Yeah.
And that civil process ensures accountability reaches beyond just the one bad actor. It addresses the specific negligence, the failed policies, the lack of supervision, the useless cameras that allowed this repeated systematic routine abuse to happen. It ensures that the message to the industry is clear. Oversight is non-negotiable.
The gravity of this case, it's just amplified by the fact that the victims here were nonverbal toddlers. They couldn't go home and tell their parents what was happening. The entire exposure of this rested solely on that surveillance footage.
That's right.
So the question we leave you with today, you the listener, is this. Given how vulnerable this population is, what level of routine mandatory video review should be required across the country for facilities like this? What specific non-negotiable protocols have to be enforced to make sure oversight systems are actually effective at stopping harm before it becomes a headline?